Welcome to Inflection Points. Join hosts Carlo Guzzetti and Tim Harrison as we explore Extreme's vision of the infinite enterprise. We see a world where people have become infinitely distributed around the globe, which means businesses must work at scale and focus increasingly on becoming consumer-centric to connect with each and every one of them. Carla, we're here to talk about cloud.
Yeah, we are. I think we know one or two things about cloud. I mean, I might spend maybe, 90% of my day talking about cloud. Maybe 95%.
Maybe.
I feel like we could have a good convo on that.
I spend most of my time talking to you through cloud. So,
did you
see that?
Because we're in the infinite enterprise.
That's right. That was fantastic. In full disclosure, for anybody who doesn't know, some outlets have identified us as number 2 in cloud managed networking and the fastest growing in cloud managed networking. It's not bad. It's not bad. But we are not here to advertise to you. That's an important part of the podcast, is that's not our goal.
No, but we do know quite a lot about it, seeing as our teams are always thinking about what's next in cloud, right? That's how you end up being number 2, is constantly thinking about what's next and how can we innovate. Am I right?
You are right. And, a few short years ago, if you will, cloud was sort of seen as just another business model, another technology, another way of delivering some services. But certainly with the pandemic, what we've seen is that cloud has become quite a necessity in the ability to deliver services. And we've gone through a tipping point, if you will, on an inflection point on our use of cloud technologies. And I think that it's an important time for us to be understanding how this is going to look going forward.
Right. I agree, because, I haven't been in technology all of that long. I've only been really, working in traditional tech now for 2 years. Prior to that, I was in the media industry. And, I think one thing I noticed about cloud, maybe not that long ago, 15,
in your millennial days,
in my millennial days as an elder millennial, I would say, I remember when cloud first happened, it was really just about like storage, and, iTunes was like, store your songs in the cloud. And even though I knew that Napster was in the cloud, because yes, I'm that old, I hadn't really,
yes, you're that young.
We did not call it the cloud, but it was really just storage back in the day. And then as time went on, I could see that the cloud was becoming more and more relevant, and it made it easier for me to collaborate with teams from around the world, whether they were in Europe, Australia, Asia, the United States. I used it to manage teams, major products like Salesforce, all cloud managed. And that became table stakes in business continuity. The way that we collaborated over Google became table stakes. And you can start to see it really become just part and core to everyday business. But yet it still feels very new and very kind of trendy. And, I think, to your point, Tim, I don't think it's a trend anymore. I think it might be here to stay.
I think so too. And I'm possibly slightly older than you.
Maybe.
And maybe. We won't talk about that, though. And we've seen these sort of trends, and people have seen trends in the industry where we started off with centralized computing, and then it became decentralized, and then there was back to more centralization. And now this decentralized, sort of centralized decentralization, if you will. You're putting your stuff into the cloud, and people look at the cloud as a single sort of amorphous thing out there. But what I think is really important about that is that those who feel that this is all going to swing back to everything on-prem are missing the point, because it's not about placement per se. It's about the technologies that are used to deliver this. So those technologies, I feel, will continue to expand and add significantly greater value no matter where they live. And I just wrote a blog recently on the Extreme Networks site about service providers providers and how service providers need to change or they'll become irrelevant. They need to be able to take advantage of these cloud technologies, or they're going to find themselves being outpaced not only by their competitors, but by their customers. Yeah. And I think it's a huge lesson to learn as we look at these adoptions of cloud and where cloud is going to go.
Right. And if massive industries like service providers are realizing that they have to go to cloud, or we're asserting that they need to go to cloud in order to keep up, in order to keep pace with everything that's happening as a result of the pandemic and everybody being more infinitely distributed and being able to scale, we have to, this means it's no longer a trend. It's a thing. It's here to stay. It's not going to have a pendulum backswing. We are going to forever leverage this technology in the future. And I think the question is, what does that future look like?
Right. Yeah. And with the infinite enterprise and that ability to scale, the ability to have that infinite distribution and a consumer-centric view, we now know how it applies to people. How do we continue to apply that, and how does it grow? How does it change as we look 10, 20, 50 years into the future?
And I know exactly who we should talk to for that crystal ball.
I think I know who you're talking about.
Mr. Bill Lundgren here at Extreme Networks. He is our portfolio architect for cloud data and app operations at Extreme. He's also the pride of Wisconsin. I'm very excited to talk to him.
Me too. Let's have that conversation. So, Bill, can we talk about cloud and how it's applied today? Do you see cloud as table stakes for any business doing business today?
Absolutely. I think it's a huge part of modern technology. We've gotten to the point with distributed enterprise, and especially during the pandemic, we start to see, efficiencies gained with the cloud. We start to see people downsizing data centers because now there's less to maintain. At this point in the technology evolution, cloud makes absolute sense for just about every organization.
So do you think it would be fair to say that in the future, you can't survive if you have an only on-prem solution?
I think if you're large enough, certainly for small business, cloud may not make sense just because their needs might not be there. But for most enterprises, the need of cloud, I think, is going to be able to work around the fact that we have a staffing shortage in the world right now. People aren't working. It's hard to find talent. Yep. So I don't need server folks. I don't need to worry about procurement, all of the chip shortages, all of the shipping issues that happen right now. All go away when you start looking at cloud. So it is one of those things that for certain businesses, it might not, but those are going to be the minority, not the majority.
Bill, we're cloud believers at Extreme. We have lots of experience in the cloud. We've done a lot of work in the cloud, and we're looking to continue doing that to support businesses. But help me and help the rest of the listeners understand, what is cloud? Is cloud a business model? Is cloud a technology architecture? What does cloud really mean? And how can we define that in such a way that we have a frame of reference going forward?
It's a really good question, Tim. And we've talked earlier about, I think if you ask 10 different people what cloud is, you get 11 different answers. But it is absolutely all of everything that you just mentioned. It's a business model, especially for us here at Extreme. There are processes involved in making the cloud a reality, both in back-end processes, in front-end processes, in terms of sales, from a business usage perspective, because here at Extreme, we use SaaS services for things like Salesforce and marketing tools and things, just like any other business would. So cloud is really about it's an adoption of a new workflow in your business. It's about whether or not you're designing cloud or consuming cloud, you're really changing the way and the paradigm that you're working within your business, not only from a procurement perspective, but a software maintenance perspective, hardware maintenance. It's really kind of adopting a lifestyle.
I think what's really interesting about what you just said and where my mind immediately jumps to is, what are some of the business outcomes of adopting that style of work for businesses? One thing that leaps to mind for me is clearly business continuity is one. I know we briefly talked about before, everybody's more distributed right now, and cloud is one of the easiest ways to do that. Can you talk a little bit about, some of the business outcomes that are a result of moving to this?
Oh, absolutely. There are huge impacts that you can do. I remember back in my enterprise career, I worked for an insurance company, and we spent $10 million building just a data center. That wasn't the equipment that went in it. That was just air conditioning, generator, and a building. Because you have to start thinking about, and it was not a big data center. We're talking, I think it was just a little under 20 or 30,000 square feet. So when you start looking at the cost savings of that and looking at what you can do from now, especially when you're, to your point, is high availability and redundancy and making sure business continuity is there. If I go off to Amazon, I instantaneously can build servers that are redundant in two different places. And not just in a geographic region, but across the world. I can put a site in Europe. I can put a site in the US. I can back up. I can archive. I can do all of this stuff without ever procuring hardware. And it's a matter of minutes sometimes to do these types of things. And then you set it, forget it, the old Ron Popeil type of scenario where you once it's built and once you have someone that knows what they're doing, it can be done very, very quickly. And even more importantly, it can be scripted, it can be automated, it can be built around a set of standards to help eliminate the human error components of it, especially with modern day cloud architecture and orchestration tools. So the cloud does have some distinct advantages over the legacy hard data center in that you don't have to worry about having duplicates of everything because you can build it into your cloud architecture.
Maybe this is a bit of a basic question, and I'm interested in the answer in multiple ways, but the question I'm thinking of is how hard is it to change your workflows? So you talked about cloud as a new way to have workflows, and the workflows need to change for you to be able to become a part of the cloud generation, if you will. So how hard is it to get from a legacy model into a cloud model?
Oh, it can be as difficult or as easy as you want it to be. Let's put it that way.
Great answer.
The IT workflows from management perspective do change. You're now talking about DevOps and security ops because you're now dealing with services that are quite literally in the cloud. So you've got to have some talent and some skill sets that might be a little different than what you traditionally would employ on an on-premises data center. But the overall, once that infrastructure is built, the maintenance of it and the usage of the applications, your users, the actual customers of your own IT operation aren't going to know the difference. To them, it's just an application they're using, so they don't care how you're getting there. But just some subtle differences, I think, in just terms of that generalized IT maintenance, because it is cloud-based and you're going to be somewhat constrained at times around certain services and certain capabilities. Perfect example of that is IPv6 support. And recently, we've been looking at this here at Extreme. And while AWS just recently added some support for it, Google and Azure both are still, there's plans for it, but they lag behind. So you do have to adapt your IT organization sometimes around constraints of the cloud, which might not exist in an on-premises data center. But the good news is the cloud adapts pretty quickly. So as long as there's a demand for a particular feature within it, you usually don't have to wait long in order to get it.
So what happens if you're not moving to the cloud? Like if we're looking at changing how people are doing business, like obviously our world has changed over the past 2 years. What happens to an organization that doesn't move to the cloud? What is going to be the impact?
I think you're going to start to see everything that we've got going on right now. If you look at the cost of shipping. My wife actually works in heavy industry with shipping parts on very large container ships. They bring a bunch of stuff over, and what cost $3,000 a year or two ago to ship is now $30,000 to bring a container over on a ship. Wow. And when you think about having a lot of the manufacturing of these components, whether it be servers, hard drives, all varying pieces of, right down to the chip level, all overseas, and then trying to get that hardware, you might not be able to move as agilely as you could before the pandemic. Versus the cloud, those servers are sitting there. Amazon and Microsoft, they've got contracts, and they've got excess capacity. So even if it takes them 6 months to get a new server, it doesn't matter because there's still one sitting there waiting for you right now to be able to keep moving forward with your same progress. So I think anybody who's not cloud is going to very quickly find themselves behind and having to slow their IT development down because of staff shortages, because of hardware availability, shipping constraints, and just overall, the complexity of getting and procuring things in the IT industry right now, at least until things settle down and get somewhat back to normal. Also, too, I think it's, if we ever have another situation, we've proven very, very well that the cloud works. When the pandemic hit and everybody started working from home, you didn't see Zoom suddenly say, "Oh, sorry, we can't handle the load." You didn't see Microsoft go, "Oh, everybody stop for a minute." The business continued. Versus
everybody was able to scale effectively, right?
Right.
Absolutely. People that used, cloud-based remote access type solutions or were already doing some cloud type things, they didn't have a bit of a problem. But if you talk to VARs who sold traditional, legacy box-based, let's say VPN solutions, for instance, their phones lit up like Christmas trees because they're, oh my God, I have 500 people working from home and I have 100 licenses on this device. I need to unlock it. And some of our Extreme's competitors were doing wonderful things for customers, giving them, temporary licenses to get by until they could, cut the POs. And there was a lot of good spirited things that happened in the industry. But, again, when you're fixed on localized hardware, that can be problematic.
Right. So scale is a massive game changer when it comes to cloud. The ability to distribute that amongst different clouds or even different areas around the world to be able to address the needs of the user in different regions. It sounds like, the cloud effectively has taken away a lot of the constraints around somebody who's built themselves into a particular data center or a particular architecture.
It really, it's 100% scale, both horizontal and vertical. Because if you look at, your traditional, I want to spin up an application. When you do that on physical hardware in a physical data center, you've now got that server and you hope that it's big enough. Well, what happens if your application's really great and suddenly everybody and their brother wants to use it? Well, now you're buying bigger servers.
Right.
Versus cloud, I can stop the instance, move it to a bigger instance, turn it back on again, and the only thing I've really done is a brief interruption and a bigger bill. So it does give you, the extreme flexibility. And what's really great about cloud and what we like with our own development is the fact that you effectively have a license to screw up. What I mean by that is you have the ability to gamble. So if I come up with an idea and I want to know if it's going to work, we can go off in a test environment and spin one up in minutes. We can test it for pennies, quite literally. I could spend $20 for an afternoon, spin up a whole bunch of servers, test it and go, that's a really great idea. This might actually work. Or, that's really not a great idea. We should just forget about this. And I've spent $20 versus going to the boss and buying servers and disk and storage only to figure out that your idea really doesn't work. So from an R&D perspective and of keeping velocity of innovation there, cloud, I think is absolutely on the forefront of that.
Well, and I think you just hit exactly what I was thinking, which is it allows for a velocity of innovation. And it sounds to me pretty much that as we started out this conversation, cloud is basically table stakes for business at this moment in time. And I think that the pandemic has just increased adoption of it for all the reasons that you've just outlined. But my big question is, where do you see this going? How is all of this innovation, this speed of business, and also everything that's changed about our day-to-day because of the pandemic, what holds in the future for cloud? Because I think a lot of people think it might be fairly mature at this point in time. Where do we go from here? And what else is out there in the next 10, 20, 50 years?
Oh, that's wow.
Look into your crystal ball and tell me all you know.
Yes. So I think, the traditional business, for large service providers, we've been working in the world of containerization and microservices and Kubernetes for a number of years now. Traditional business is still very much VMware centric and virtualized application centric. So I think, the future of cloud is as adoption increases. One of the best ways you can get your bang for the buck is much like we did in traditional data center. You had server after server after server running individual apps, and then VMware and virtualization came along and everyone started buying, half as many servers and putting twice as many apps on them. Well, now we can get even further efficiencies if businesses are willing to adopt the Kubernetes and container-driven environments. The problem with those environments is they can be somewhat difficult to set up unless you're in cloud. And with cloud, there's all sorts of automagic services that you can just enable, like Amazon, the Kubernetes services that they have. You can just turn them on and start loading containers, and poof, it's all just kind of magic. So it saves in that regard to being able to optimize and efficiencies. So I think, crystal ball is further cloud adoption, further adoption of containerization, businesses starting to look at optimizing their in-house applications to run even in a lot of times serverless environments where you have workloads that are not necessarily critical, maybe something that needs to run every so often. You don't need a server to run those. You can modernize with cloud environments, do serverless compute to where you just pop these things off every so often and you're paying pennies on the dollar to have a process execute and give you this reliable, processing. Also, too, I think, if we start to look at the future, as more and more data goes to cloud, you start to get more and more of a target on your back. It's much like in the old days when people would buy Macs because there's AKA no viruses for a Mac. Well, it only works until everybody has a Mac.
Right.
So, if your idea is I'm going to reduce my security footprint by putting everything in the cloud and hiding it, well, that only works so often or so far before the people that are really good at getting in start trying to own Amazon or own Azure. We've already seen this happen with the SolarWinds attacks and some of these other attacks that have occurred. So I think security is going to be on the forefront of innovation here in terms of optimization of containers, tools and facilities to tell you what's going on, log what's going on. Also, too, encryption is going to become more and more important. Things like homomorphic encryption and more widespread adoption of tools like that to allow you to encrypt data, but still use the data in its encrypted format and get results in an encrypted format and have software still work without truly decrypting the data. All of those types of things are going to become more and more important as cloud evolves. And I think, too, we start to look at all of the different players in cloud. They're all very similar, but have enough subtle differences to where, you might want to run something in Azure or you might want to run something in AWS. Well, what if you want to run something in both of them? Now you're maintaining two cloud environments, and now you need staff that's trained in two different clouds.
Right.
So, as we evolve, it will be interesting to see what the industry does in terms of standardization, unification, and maybe even a little bit of intercooperation so that I can have a manager of cloud or a cloud of clouds, if you will, something along those lines.
Cloud of clouds.
Yes, the layered clouds, stratus layer or something. But that I think is going to become important as well as we start to look at some of these the evolutions.
Quick question about that in particular, Bill. Like there are applications out there that allow you to orchestrate different clouds, but that doesn't necessarily mean that workloads work equivalently across different clouds. So when you talk about a cloud of clouds, what do you foresee as being the actual cloud of clouds? What would that look like to you? How would you describe that, if you would?
I think it's going to come down to what the industry has already started to do, and that is APIs. API is give me a centralized architecture that I can use to command workloads across all the platforms without having to learn, how does Microsoft do this? How does Oracle do this? How does IBM do this? Just essentially an open API or an open config like universally standardized API that will allow me to programmatically start, stop, and manage workloads. Kubernetes gives us some of that flexibility because it is at least a unifying standard, but it's all of the infrastructure building pieces, the things similar like Terraform that can build and construct these things and then manage those workloads are still very much provider specific. So if we get to a point of that cloud of clouds, it would simply be a way of unifying and linking the workloads together so that I can create and build that infrastructure, but at the same time monitor that infrastructure. That's going to become more and more important. Is now that you have these loads in places where you can't necessarily see if the lights are on, how do you determine that? Because if it takes me 15 minutes to get notified from Amazon that their data center overheated, which actually happened here a few months ago, they had Amazon had an outage, just like Microsoft's had outages. But Amazon overheated a data center in Tokyo, and parts of their data center went down. Well, it takes them time to understand what that issue is. Takes them time to notify you what that issue is. And by the time you get notified, well, now you're 10 minutes into wondering, hey, dude, where's my computer? So we need to have far more rapid response, just like you would in your own data center, right? If something suddenly went down, you just walk downstairs or walk over and open the door and see what's going on. We don't have that visibility right now in the cloud, at least in immediate real-time response.
It sounds like there's still quite a bit for us to learn in the cloud, and particularly a lot of work to do around security. But in a world where we've solved these problems and what the future looks like, obviously 5G and connectivity play a huge piece in making sure that and ensuring the success of cloud, particularly as we end up being more and more distributed in the future. But I guess my question to you is what is life like where everything is cloud-based, where you can work from anywhere, you can shop from anywhere, you can have that experience from anywhere, and you have the level of connectivity to provide a really, hyper individualized experience. What is life like? And do you think the cloud is going to be able to scale for that sort of future?
I absolutely think it can scale. It's going to take an adoption, though, like we were talking about earlier, is it needs to become table stakes so that every business, every possibility is accounted for by using that cloud data. But that is the beauty of it, is once it's in a place where as long as I have connectivity, I should be able to get to it. Now you're talking about ubiquitous access. You're talking about your refrigerator being able to have you, remind your telephone that you need to buy this at the store. You're talking about just this, I don't want to say utopia, because it's a blessing and a curse, right? You now have no excuse to disconnect, or to tell the boss, hey, I was in a place where there was a dead spot. You don't have that anymore.
Those days.
Yeah, the pager doesn't work there.
Sorry, no Wi-Fi on the plane. Can't talk to you.
For those who remember pagers, Bill, nice.
Well, that's a perfect example, Carla, is the idea of the airplanes. Now that Starlink is becoming popular, the military's done tests with Elon Musk's Starlink, and they were proving out 600 and 700 megabits in a moving aircraft. So to be able to deliver that kind of data rate and in a moving aircraft that's moving 600 miles an hour is amazing. So as we start to get faster and better and more, especially wireless is going to be that driver to that utopian kind of data access methodology, is because now I can be anywhere. I can do anything from any device and still get the same speeds as my laptop. I mean, that's that kind of access is going to give us just, I think, a much broader capability for, essentially things like, self-driving cars. Until, as much as I love the idea of a car that can drive itself, let's put it this way. Until every car is self-driving, you'll never account for the fact that there's going to be some goober that's going to be, fumbling in his seat looking for the penny drop. And right. How do you program a car for that? You need to have access so that every car can talk to every other car, and there's got to be some way of controlling that, which again is cloud. So it's connectivity, and it's the business continuity of keeping it up, and the infrastructure in the cloud that's going to enable these new technologies.
Now, specifically to that, and I wouldn't want to cast aspersions on any self-driving car making companies, but as there is that journey, and we look at the utopian refrigerator of the future, what is the limitation that's causing some limited adoption in certain parts of the business world that are still sort of struggling with virtualization? Is it the availability of applications? Is it resistance to wanting to give up control of that? What holds us back from this utopian future?
It's more so the latter part, is that willingness to give up the control. There is a self-preservation, I think, in IT of, as long as there's a data center, I have a job. And people see that, that, hey, there's no more servers in my data center, so therefore they're not going to need me. I think that's a wrong way to look at it. I think if you're in IT right now and you don't have cloud skills, get them. It's not hard to go out and get certified, or it's not hard to figure out, how. I mean, it's still a computer, right? It's still, the cloud is that old joke. It's just you're using someone else's computer, but you're using it with a lot more bells and whistles. But it's 100% letting go of that data and understanding that you're not in possession of it. There's nothing to go down in the data center and hug. There's no more there's no more blinky lights. But even on top of that, and kind of bolting into that, is the security aspect of it. There's been so many very, very public hacks lately, and more of these ransomware type things, and people are getting way, now you have states, and you don't have to worry about the script kiddie. It's the state sponsored stuff that just terrifies people. Right. And trusting your data to someone else, just much like the SolarWinds issue, right? Is you trust that when you download a piece of software, it's not going to have a piece of secret code that's been signed by a certificate. So, the fact that you're now trusting your data and literally the livelihood of your business, your ability to order product, ship product, manage your machinery, manage your time scale, your timetables and payroll and benefits, you put all that in the cloud and then it gets compromised. That's a big deal. And so there are people that just don't want to let go of that yet, or they're worried that there are issues if they do, or who's responsible for keeping that data private. And then too, you have the fact that the big players in this industry can be somewhat competitive with certain businesses. I mean, if I'm a retailer, the last person I want to give my money to is Amazon.
Yeah, so, right. Yeah, that's definitely.
Fair. So, or even Google now is some of the retailers see Google as a direct competitor, which leaves me with Microsoft. So there is some of that too. Is the biggest players in this space are sometimes direct competitors for the people that want to use the product.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground already in just, our short time together. But I think one thing that we always try to leave everybody with is, there's a lot to consider as businesses are taking on cloud and trying to integrate it either in some small way or in some large way into their day-to-day. And Bill, just as our last question to you, what do you think is the most important first step if you're a business that's struggling with cloud adoption, or you have security concerns? Where is the easy first entry point for any business?
Oh, that's a great one. Is the first step I would tell people to do if you're looking at migrating all of your workloads is to understand what those workloads are. Look at and fully know what systems you have, and then prioritize the ones that are the oldest, prioritize the ones that are the least impact. So the maintenance system, or something that's, it's still important to your business, but it won't cause you to not ship product. Mm-hmm. And start small. Move those first few little old workloads where the server is dying and it's been, needing to be replaced. It's what I like to call, you run it till it rusts in the rack. Those types of machines are the perfect candidate to move over to those workloads and to cut your teeth on managing it, understanding it, and seeing what can happen. And then move to bigger and bigger and bigger machines and bigger services that are more important. The other thing is to look at is, how are you getting to the cloud? Because remember, you're moving your data loads to another facility. It doesn't matter what kind of high-speed connectivity you have between your offices. You now are relying on the internet, or preferably some kind of direct connect to that cloud service. So you're going to have to understand, how am I getting there? What types of investment do I need to make in either standard internet bandwidth or dedicated bandwidth to my new cloud provider? And then make sure that your employees know that this is not the end of their job. This is not some way of getting rid of them. You're still going to need that talent. You're still going to need people to run those systems. They just need to take up a new skill in terms of, now they need to be able to run the cloud instead of just know how to run Windows. And if you can make that transition with your employees, start with some basic workloads, and then make sure you have good connectivity to get there, it will be a relatively easy transition.
Great. So first and foremost, migrate your rusty racks to the cloud.
Yep.
Make sure your employees are upskilled, and, think about your connectivity and your investment there. I mean, those seem like 3 easy steps.
Yep. It doesn't take much once you get those out of the way.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Bill. We really appreciate your insights on this. The future is utopian for my refrigerator, and I look forward to being safe on the roads.
Yes, don't forget the self-driving cars.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Bill.
Thanks, guys.
Carla, are you convinced?
Yes, I am thoroughly convinced that cloud is not a trend. It is a thing. It's happening.
It is a thing. Yes, I agree. And I admit that I may have been convinced prior to this, but I think what I heard continues to reinforce the idea that this is indeed a thing.
It is, and also it is key to the infinite enterprise. Right. I mean, one thing that we definitely covered and Bill reiterated time and time again is that in order to scale, in order to work with distributed resources and distributed teams, you have to have the cloud. This is just the way it's going to be. But I like the fact that, there's some clear steps on what to do.
Yeah. He absolutely gave us sort of the directions for those who haven't made it to cloud yet and how they can get there from here, which is fantastic because sometimes we talk about cloud in such a nebulous way without actually focusing on, what are the practical ways to get there. And then that takes us into how do those technologies enable us in the future? There are things that we haven't really conceived of yet that will get us there. The cloud of clouds, if you will, the ability to stop looking at clouds as isolated things within, that sort of space out there, but into something that can be manipulated and controlled and leveraged from the organization anywhere we need it. So I think that direction is really exciting to hear about how we can make that a utility for the consumer to be able to leverage as they need.
Yeah, exactly. It's just making it more tangible. And I think every business has to make the decision between, what our legacies are and what's rusty and what are you going to move. But I think that, the story's done here. It is a thing. Cloud, look into it.
You may want to check it out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
That's fantastic. Well, that's it for this episode of Inflection Points. Join us on our next episode of Inflection Points, where we take to the skies for a discussion about drones. Have drones delivered on their promise? Episodes drop every other Wednesday. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.